Hey there, Wargamers, Justin Iron Paint here, and today I want to talk to you guys about sleeper units. I'd like to welcome you guys back to the channel. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you aren't and you've been here for a while, smash that like button. And for both of you guys, or in both cases, if you want to help grow the channel here and support what we're doing, obviously we've got the links in the description below for all the companies that help are associated with me and help support me, and vice versa. But just sharing these videos and helping us grow the channel is good too. So invite your friends. Let's get more Battletech people involved and get people into the hobby. That said, today's video I want to talk about sleeper units. Now, if you watched my recent battle report, I played Comstar versus John's Leal Forces, or Capellan Confederation. And this is my list. These are the models that I ran. Now, this was a very beer and pretzel style of game. We played with an interesting mechanic for initiative. And we only played 150 points. I didn't feel like I brought anything particularly cheesy. My damage output on these is all reasonable, with the exception of the Rifleman, but he's only a 4. Nothing crazy. But the things that I feel like were really good on the surface here, and I struggle with this, and perhaps you do, you might as well, and you may understand, quality versus quantity. And one of the things that I've heard people say, and I 100% subscribe to this belief now, is that quantity can be a quality of its own. And sometimes when I'm looking at a unit, I struggle. So, for example, the Rifleman is one of the first models I wanted to put in this list. Fantastic. Point level was good. Its damage output's good. Its range is great. It's a Rifleman. We're going to come back to him in a minute. And then I threw in some light mechs. So we've got the Mercury. I wanted that TMM of 4, 20 movement. Its damage output isn't great, 210. HP is not very great, only 4 life. But if I get on the rear of a mech, that's 3 dice, or 3 damage that I'm rolling on you. Skill 4, so reasonable chance to hit. But consistently able to just harass and be annoying. And with a 20-inch move, 30-inch run, that's pretty good, right? And then for the last of our lights, now here I built a level 2, which 6 units for Comstar. Last one's the Mongoose. Not quite as fast as the Mercury, a little bit more damage, a little bit more life, a little less, or less TMM, so he's got a 3 instead of a 4, 220, but still, can't ignore him, sprint of 24, can almost keep up with that Mercury, and you can't ignore these 2 units, and they're cheap for what they do. But the thing that the Rifleman here does for Comstar, I think this is the only faction that gets it, this version of the Rifleman, the 5CS, TMM of 2. Like, let's zoom in on that and give you guys a peek. Like, that catches people off guard the few times that I have played this thing. Because a Rifleman for the Inner Sphere, typically this is a heavy mech. Inner Sphere heavies usually have TMM of 1. And then you roll in with this Rifleman who's got a TMM of 2, which is the same as like a Crab or a Bushwhacker or a medium mech. Like I think a Hunchback's got a TMM 2 because they're faster. Rifleman's got it. Usually Rifleman's a paper tiger. It does damage, gets hit, goes down. That TMM is wild to me. And it catches people off guard. The damage output's not too bad. He's skill 3, only 42 points, not bad at all. And then you can, use the cover so that you can leverage that TMM 2, get obscurity, so you get effectively a +1 to being hit, and then a medium range. So someone with a skill 4, shooting at your Rifleman when he moves, 4 plus range. Let's say it's medium on average. With Alpha Strike, most engagements are at medium. So skill 4 for them, most likely. Shooting at medium range, so +2 more, so 6. His TMM is 2, so 8. And if you're playing him right, hopefully you've got obscurity. In some way you're using a little bit of cover, so 9s. 9's to hit. You need a decently above average rolls to hit him. That's not bad. It's really good. So that's a unit for Comstar that TMM catches people off guard, and it's unexpected, right? So it's a little bit of a sleeper, but not specifically where the list, or my discussion for this list wanted to go. I love that Rifleman. He's great. I love my light mechs. They're really nice. But the thing that was the MVP of the list here, which, or MVPs, are the vehicles. And this is where I struggle with list building. I usually look at a unit, and I want to see the quality. What's the damage output? What's the raw stats? And then I look at the point total. I'm like, oh shit, I can't field at 150 points a full lance of all big, stompy, heavy mechs. You can't do it. You kind of have to have a variety of units. And even more so with Comstar at 150 points, wanting to be fluffy and field at level 2 with 6 units, like that's rough, right? In come the vehicles. Now, the LRM carrier is pretty obvious. He's skill 4. Park him somewhere. Let him be stationary, so he gets the -1 to his skill, making him effectively a 3 most of the game. Doesn't have a lot of damage, but 3 is pretty nice, and he's got LRM 3 and indirect IF 3, so you can fire indirect for 3 dice, and you just roll and pray, roll and pray. And if you fire indirect and his skill is 4 and he's stationary, it's a 3. You take a penalty for indirect, goes back to a 4. It's a wash. Be stationary, ignore the penalty. Essentially, it's comes out as a net 0 there. The issue that came up with the LRM that I forgot was the mechanics for spotters shooting and how that impacts the vehicle. Because like if you fire indirect with a spotter, the vehicle takes the penalty for shooting, you're good. If the spotter fires, the spotter takes a penalty, and the indirect fire takes a penalty. I missed the indirect firer, I think, or vice versa. One of them, I only gave one the penalty when they both get one. It's in the rule book. It's something I'll do a video on at some point, covering like rules you get wrong or rules that are easy to miss because they're obscure. A couple other ones that are like that are the heat. When you take heat, it lowering your TMM. That's not obvious, but it is in the book because it's not on here. And then if you take I think it's a motive hit on a vehicle or on a mech. So like the MP hit drops your movement by half, but I believe there's mechanics in there that talk about that removing TMM as well when you take movement hits. And it's not on the critical hit table. You have to go to like the book to find that. So like if you're using the card solely, there's some extra information, tidbits that aren't on here that you would need to know where to find that. So, but that said, the real sleepers here were the Bulldog medium tanks, right? They don't do a lot of damage. 3-2-0, 8 movement, 1 TMM, 4 skill. Nothing special going on here, whatever. But they're cheap. 6 life for 17 points. And if they die, well, that sucks. But you can't ignore them. You can't ignore them. They can almost keep up with a Rifleman who's got the 10 move versus the 8. And if you're running a standard Rifleman with a Team M1, they're all equally lucrative targets. If you run these Bulldogs near that Rifleman, your opponent might ignore the Rifleman to fire at these because they're going to be easier to hit, especially if he's got obscurity. Team M2 plus obscurity, whereas these guys don't get it because they're vehicles, so they can't hide. They can hide fully behind, but if they're 50%, like they're not going to get a bonus from intervening terrain, stuff like that, other than I believe trees. But yeah, so the thing with these that made them so good for me is that they're cheap, decent damage, can't ignore them. They have HP you have to chew through. You can play the objective game, and it adds activations. Now, even if you're playing not like the cards we used, where at some point you have to move 2 to their 1 because you outnumber them by double, that's still fine. You still have all these little guys they have to deal with. And that's the thing that I learned from Southern Assault last year and this year, is that last year I played and I had 10 mechs, 2 battle armor. So 12 activations total, right? That's massive. I had 2 stars of Beta Galaxy Clan Wolf and 2 battle armor. I would have had 5 if I could have duplicates, but I couldn't. So the issue I ran into in 2021 at Southern Assault was my units. I didn't have very good quality units because their skills to be able to get at 350 points 2 stars of mechs and 2 battle armor. Like my skills were not where I wanted them to be, right? But the quantity being a quality all of its own was true. While I was going to struggle to kill some things, I had a lot of material to play objectives, and sometimes killing stuff in a game is not how you win the game. Getting the flag, holding objective is how you win. And even more so if you have more activations, more units, more material to play with, that's still HP they have to chew through. Even if your skill's bad, they still got to chew through it if it's on objective. If your quantity equation takes out one of their quality models from their equation, it makes these guys even more viable because you have more material, right? So if you play, if for some reason, this is an extreme example, somebody sits down, they come in, they bring this Griffin, and they're like, yeah, this is my badass Griffin. We're playing 150 points. This Griffin is 65 points because I made him skill 1 or something. I mean, that's cool. He's going to hit almost everything he shoots at. But when he dies, how much does he take out before he dies? Will that Griffin take out 65 points, or whatever this example is, of my list before my models take him out? And if he doesn't, and he drops, that's so much of your material you traded, right? That very high quality piece, if he doesn't make his points quickly and he goes down, you lose him, and I still have all of my crappy pawns to do work. So finding that happy balance between the quality and the quantity equation is a thing. Now, the thing that I found interesting about these vehicles was that typically, as I was saying at the beginning of the video, is I look at a unit and I go, oh crap, he's got such great stats and he's got good abilities and his damage and his HP and his TMM and all this stuff floods in, and then I go, look at the points. When I fielded these tanks with John, I knew the quality equation, or the quantity versus quality equation. I understood that I was going to have 2 activations on him. I knew that because I figured he was going to play a Lance because he's playing Inner Sphere to be fluffy. I was going to play level 2 because I'm playing Comstar to be fluffy. And I looked at these Bulldogs and I was like, okay, I wanted to bring Demolishers, but they didn't have them listed in Master Unit list. That's another gripe I had. The Comstar at the era we played, it had Demolisher listed with the classic cost. It didn't have a Demolisher card for that era, and I don't know why. It listed the classic one, but not the Alpha Strike cards. It was bizarre. So I went with the Bulldog. It's fine. Came out in the wash. We're good. But I looked at it and I was like, oh, okay, he's just going to shoot them. Their TMM's low. They don't have a lot of damage. They're just annoying units. They ended up kind of being MVP worthy. It took several turns to take one out, and they were consistently rolling dice, and if one died, it wasn't in the world because I was using them like armored up pawns. Drove forward, roll my 2-3 dice, and just move on. If they don't do anything cool, and you can't ignore them. So what ended up happening was like my tanks took pressure off of the Riflemen. These guys in the backfield took pressure off the tanks and the Riflemen, or if my opponent, in this case John, had to ignore them because he couldn't position with them, it just drives him forward into the tanks to figure out what he wants to do, and he has to make choices. Do I shoot the tank? Do I shoot the mech? The mech is more lethal. The tank's easier to hit. Maybe I can clear it off the table. That tank still has 6 HP versus the Rifleman's 8. So yeah, the TMM is different. But if this was a normal Rifleman with TMM 1, he has 2 more HP than this tank, and he's equally as easy to hit, or as hard to hit, depending on your perspective. So it's one of those, like, the investment to clear the Rifleman off the table versus the tank is very, very similar. So you have to help, they have to make a choice. So that's interesting, and if they go after the Rifleman, cool, the tanks keep doing their stuff. So that's the thing that I find particularly interesting. I'm not sure, I feel like I might have deviated here from the sleeper unit philosophy, but to rein that in, that's kind of where I was at with these. Was the damage wasn't what I thought it would be, but their effectiveness was more. And I think if I was trying to impart a philosophy for you guys building lists and looking at Alpha Strike stuff, is that don't get so caught up on the damage profiles. Try and build a list and play with it and see what they do, because that 2 damage isn't much, but it's consistent. Both of these just 2 damage every turn, rolling to see if they hit it, and they can't be ignored. And if they do ignore them, they'll just keep doing stuff. And if you drive them forward, see, the thing with these that I also liked about the tanks is I'm not as worried about losing a tank. At least these, because they were cheap. I'm more worried about losing the Rifleman, who costs 4 times as, or 2.5 times as much, give or take. Rough math. I'm more worried about using him, so I'll drive these forward. Yeah, sure, I have medium range 2 damage, but I got 3 damage at short. It's easier for you to hit me at short, but you can't ignore me. I will drive that tank into your face, and you have to deal with it. So I find that interesting. They're more lethal than like a pawn and chess, but even then, pawn can take stuff out too. But they have a lot more versatility, and I find that the cheaper, not high damage tank units from that particular battle report, for me, felt like the sleeper unit because they did a lot of work. They couldn't be ignored. So when you guys play, are there any particular units you find yourself gravitating towards that on paper you don't feel like are going to do a bunch of damage or do a lot for you, but end up carrying some weight? As we sign off here and wind down for today's video, in Southern Assault 2021, I had a couple of units that felt like this. I had a Pack Hunter, I don't know if it was a Pack Hunter 2, Pack Hunter 1, whatever, but he had a very far jump, and it was a strong jump. And I think he was skill 7. He couldn't hit shit, but I could throw him on an objective with, I think it was strong jump, and I think that put him at like TMM 5 or something crazy. You couldn't ignore him. He was hard to hit. He scored objectives, and it was very hard for him to hit anything, but that wasn't the point. When I fielded him, I had no idea that he was going to be so good for objectives and so hard to take out. I just wanted to have 2 stars of mechs. I was pushing to have a trinary. I just couldn't do it with the infantry. But that was my goal. And then I played, and I was like, hey, him and I forget what other one it was. I had another lighter mech that could jump really far and had a high TMM, and they were so good at holding objectives and so hard to take out. It took so much material, so many shots, so much focus from the opponent to try and clear them that it let the rest of my units shoot stuff, which was kind of what I was talking about with the tanks. if the tanks are driving forward and the opponent can't ignore them, else they just get to short range and try and have a little mech meat grinder. If they're going after the stuff in the backfield, you make that choice. You make them have to deal with those. So with my light mechs, with those high TMMs, I was able to jump in on an objective. My opponents knew that I was going to have a hard time hitting with those mechs, so they knew that those mechs probably weren't there to do damage, even though I'd got some back shots and stuff with them. But they weren't there to do damage. They were there to hold the objective, because the objective wins games. And in playing the dice average and the dice gods and the mechanics, you know that, hey, they're going to need to roll this to hit. Odds are they roll this. This is how many shots they're going to have to take. And then you start seeing, like, they can't ignore that objective where I get points. They have to invest some material in it. So I made the choice for them. Statistically, like, odds are they're going to go after it because that's going to help them win the game if they can clear it. That gets pressure off my backfield, stronger units that are going to try and take advantage and make shots. So it's interesting, units that you field, you don't think they're going to do well, and then they end up maybe not doing super good themselves, but enhancing everything else. So like if these tanks go forward and maybe they kill stuff, maybe they don't, which mine did. It was fun. Some crazy rolls happened with John. But perhaps these tanks drive forward and they don't do a lot of damage, but they stop your mechs or some other juicy target in the backfield of yours from taking shots because they can't ignore them. They did do something. It just wasn't killing stuff. And I think that's interesting. It's kind of like a bait and switch kind of thing. So on that note, are there some units that you guys like to field that you feel like are sleeper units that on paper don't look like they would do well, but gameplay mechanics, they do perform in their specific job? And is that job more than just shooting stuff? What is it for you? That said, folks, thank you for making it through today's video. If you're new here, hit that like and subscribe button, share this with your friends, and let's help grow the channel. We're approaching 2,000 subs, trying to get over the hump and get this channel growing and help promote all things Battletech. Hopefully, I'll have some more videos like this coming up after I play my Jade Falcon games from the missions from the Alpha Strike box, and hopefully get a campaign going. I'll have some more stuff to talk about with my experience with units, things I like, things I don't like, stuff like that. This is fun for me because I get to ramble about a thing. Maybe this is obvious to you guys, maybe it's not. Maybe you're going to try tanks because you saw me talk about it, maybe you won't. But it's fun because this was my experience from my perspective of stuff I did, and I'm curious about units you've used, your perspective, and things you've done, and maybe I'll go, hey, I should try that. That unit's good. I've looked at that unit before, and that unit looked like utter crap, but I didn't think about it from this perspective. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'd be curious to see what you guys use. I've talked about a thing that I used with, in this case, very niche with Comstar. Maybe you'll learn something. Maybe I'll learn something from you. On that note, as always, we know I like to ramble. I say I'm going to sign off, and then I go for several more minutes. But this time, for real, we're going to sign off. Thank you guys for hanging out. As always, keep painting your models, keep rolling your dice, and I'll catch you guys next time.